The light wasn't white. That's what they always get wrong in the movies. It wasn't white at all, it was golden, like honey held up to the sun, and it poured over me in waves. I remember thinking, this isn't possible, as the hospital ceiling simply dissolved. One moment I was dying, the next I was somewhere else entirely. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Nasir, and until October of 1987, I had never questioned my faith, not once in 34 years. 7 generations of Sunni Muslims stretched behind me in an unbroken line. My family traced our lineage all the way back to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, the first caliph. Islam wasn't just my religion, it was my identity, my heritage, my entire framework for understanding the world. Then came the shingles. I'd been working too hard, barely sleeping, running my business on adrenaline and ambition. When the first blisters appeared, I ignored them. A week later, I couldn't ignore anything. The pain was excruciating, like someone had poured gasoline over my skin and lit a match. My fever spiked to 107.6 degrees, just 0.4 of a degree from death, as the doctors would later tell me. The night they admitted me to Toronto General Hospital, the doctors didn't mince words. "Worst case of shingles we've ever seen," they said, voices flat with the certainty of my prognosis. The blisters were over an inch wide. My ear had become deformed. My immune system had essentially surrendered. They gave me morphine for the pain, but we all knew it was just a courtesy. They expected to pronounce me dead by morning. That night, alone in my hospital room, I did something I'd never done before. I questioned everything. "Muhammad," I whispered into the darkness, "if you're there, help me." Silence. The monitors beeped. My skin felt like it was tearing itself apart. The fever burned through my thoughts until only one remained, desperate and raw. "God, any God, if you're real, don't let me die." That's when everything changed. The room darkened as if someone had dimmed the lights of the entire universe. And then, from that perfect darkness came the light. Golden, warm, alive somehow. It filled the room like water filling a glass, and within it formed a presence that I immediately understood was a person, though not like any person I'd ever encountered. "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob," the figure said, and the voice wasn't audible, not really. It resonated inside me like my own thoughts, but fundamentally different, clearer, more real than reality itself. I knew instantly who this was. Jesus. Not the prophet I'd been taught about, but someone far more powerful and present. I had never read the Bible. I couldn't have quoted a single verse. But in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was in the presence of the divine, not a messenger or a prophet, but God himself. "Lord," I said, and the word felt both foreign and perfectly natural on my lips. What happened next defies medical explanation. The presence, Jesus, moved closer, and I felt warmth spreading through my fevered body. Not the burning heat of infection, but something healing, restorative. The pain that had been my constant companion for weeks simply evaporated. I felt the blisters on my skin begin to recede, like watching a time-lapse film of a flower closing its petals. "You will live," the voice said, "and you will tell others what you have seen." Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the light receded. The room returned to normal, the beeping monitors, the sterile smell, the dark window reflecting my own astonished face. But I was changed, fundamentally, irrevocably changed. Morning came, and with it the doctors, their faces masks of professional confusion. The blisters had receded dramatically overnight. My fever had broken. My immune system, which hours before had been non-functional, was showing signs of recovery. They ran tests, consulted specialists, searched for explanations. I had only one, but I kept it to myself for the time being. 2 days later, they discharged me. The shingles, while not completely gone, had regressed to a manageable condition. Unprecedented, they called it. One doctor, older than the rest, looked at me with narrowed eyes and simply said, "Lucky." I knew better. The physical healing was just the beginning. Back at home, still weak but improving daily, I turned on the television one afternoon and caught a Christian program. The host looked directly into the camera and asked, "Is Jesus the Son of God?" It felt like a direct question to me, a continuation of the conversation begun in that hospital room. I fell to my knees right there in my living room and said, "Jesus, if you're really the Son of God, come into my life. Be my Lord." The warmth returned, not as overwhelming as before, but unmistakable. A certainty settled in my heart, as solid and real as the floor beneath my knees. That was the easy part. What followed was harder, telling my family, my friends, my community. The word apostate has weight in the world I came from. It carries consequences. Some relationships ended abruptly, others cooled gradually. My father didn't speak to me for 2 years, but new relationships formed too. I found a community of believers who embraced me, who helped me understand what had happened to me, who gave me language for my experience. I devoured the Bible, finding in its pages echoes of that night in the hospital. The light, the presence, the peace that transcended understanding. As months passed, I began to share my story. Tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. I spoke at small gatherings, then larger ones. People connected with something in my experience, perhaps a desperation that preceded it, perhaps a transformation that followed. Whatever it was, they listened. I never set out to become a speaker or a minister. I was a businessman, comfortable with spreadsheets and projections, not sermons and testimonies. But that night in Toronto General Hospital had given me a new purpose, and I couldn't ignore it. Today, 38 years later, I've shared my story around the world. I've seen skepticism turn to curiosity and curiosity to conviction. I've witnessed healing similar to my own. I've held the hands of the dying and told them not to fear what awaits them on the other side of this life. Some ask if I ever doubt what happened, if I ever consider that it might have been a hallucination, a product of extreme fever and medication. The question always makes me smile. Would you doubt the reality of your own hand, your own breath? What happened to me was more real than anything before or since. It wasn't a dream or a vision, it was an encounter with reality itself. Others ask if I hate my Muslim background, if I reject everything from my former life. This question saddens me. How could I hate what shaped me? How could I reject the tradition that gave me my first understanding of God? I don't see my journey as a rejection, but as a fulfillment, a continuation of the path my ancestors began, following it to a destination they couldn't have anticipated. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the God of all who seek him with sincere hearts. This I believe with every fiber of my being. I still have the medical records from Toronto General. They document my condition upon admission, the extent of the infection, the fever, the prognosis. They also document my inexplicable recovery. What they don't document, what they can't document, is the golden light that filled my room that night, or the voice that spoke to me, or the certainty that has guided every day of my life since. Some things can't be measured or recorded, they can only be experienced, and once experienced, they can never be forgotten or denied. I don't know why this happened to me. I was not especially virtuous or wise. I was just a man at the end of his rope, crying out into the darkness. Perhaps that's all any of us can do when faced with our own mortality, reach beyond what we know, beyond what we've been taught, beyond the limitations of our understanding. And sometimes, remarkably, something reaches back. If you take nothing else from my story, take this. There is more to this world than what we can see, touch, or prove. There are thin places where the veil between worlds becomes transparent. Sometimes we find these places in moments of great suffering or danger. Sometimes they find us. Either way, they change everything. I was dying in a hospital bed, and then I wasn't. I was certain of one truth, and then I became certain of another. I was one person, and then I became someone else entirely. And the light, that impossible golden light, continues to guide me forward, one step at a time.